Hi, hey, hello, how are you? And welcome to my channel. So I originally filmed a September wrap-up earlier last month, and then things just got absolutely insane. We are about to move to a different state. So October was crazy and I didn't end up having time to edit the September video. So I am just going to give you that September video and then also what I read in October and smash them together, and then you can get everything that I've read within the last 2 months. I felt like that would be better than trying to put out like the September video and then the other video that I had filmed and then the October one, and then I was like, it's probably gonna be middle of November by then and we'll be even busier packing. So this is my solution. Here are all of the books that I read in September first. Today I wanted to talk about all the books that I read in September. I read a grand total of 3 books. I know, it's never been done before. It's never been done before on my part. I've never had such a bad reading month. I love how I keep saying every month, it's gonna be better next month for sure. I don't know what happened. I swear to God, I'm reading at a normal pace and then I look up and the month is over and I'm like, what just happened? I don't know. It doesn't really matter though, because I am really excited to talk about the 3 books that I did finish. So first up is How to End a Love Story by Helene Kwong. Kind of surprised myself by picking this one up. I will admit that I don't normally gravitate towards books that I haven't heard much about or I don't know the author. I know that that's not great because it's like, how do you find something new and fresh if you're only reading what everybody else reads? But as I've stated before, one of my main goals when I first started getting back into fiction reading was to read everything that everybody else is reading, just so that I know what's going on. And now that I feel like I've read a lot of those books, it is fun to branch out and read more authors that I'd never heard of before and try to find my own stuff and what's really interesting to me. So this is a romance, you might have guessed by the title, and it is about Helen. Helen is an author of a wildly popular YA series that is being turned into a TV show. She is asked to be on the writing team for the TV show. However, somebody that she knows from her past is also on that team, and they have to figure out how to work together and be around each other without trying to hurt each other. This book was really good. I actually gave it 5 stars. It really surprised me. I think because I had never heard of this author before and I hadn't really heard other people's opinions of it, I went into it with low expectations, and maybe that was a good thing because it allowed me to really be surprised by it and end up falling in love with this book. I really loved the characters. I loved the depth of this story and the depth of the main characters' backstories. I feel like sometimes that's something that can be seriously lacking, unfortunately, in romance books. Sometimes it's a little bit too shallow, but I didn't feel that way about this one. I will say, trigger warning for grief. If that is something that can be really upsetting to you, maybe sit this one out. I really enjoyed this book though, and honestly, I feel like I would read it again. I feel like I would recommend it to other people for sure. It takes place starting in like the end of the summer and then like going into the spring, I believe, but it mainly centers around like fall and winter. So I feel like if you want to read it when it happens, that's the best time to do it. Yeah, I really loved Grant and Helen and their story. It was really cute. So I started this month off with a bang with 5 stars. Okay, so after that audiobook, I did get back to my goal of reading all the books on my physical TBR. I picked up Head Over Heels by Hannah Orenstein, and I'm actually so glad that I did. This is a romance. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and here's why. So this is a gymnastics romance. I've never read a gymnastics romance, but I will say that after this one, I am definitely open to reading more books about gymnastics. Doesn't have to be romance. I never did gymnastics as a child. I'm a very tall, lanky person. That wouldn't have worked unless I had gotten into it when I was like a literal toddler. But for some reason, I feel like gymnastics have always really intrigued me. I remember when I was a kid, like watching the Summer Olympics and the women's gymnastics and just being like in awe. And so since we just had the Summer Olympics, I felt like this was the perfect time to read this. And let me just say, I was super into it. I was super into the whole story. I was super into the gymnastics aspect. Our main character, Avery, was on track to become an Olympic gymnast, but she ended up sustaining an injury that forced her to quit the sport, unfortunately. And so she's kind of like floundering when we first meet her. It's a couple years after that. And she ends up needing to go back to her hometown to live with her parents. And she accepts a job as a gymnastics coach for a young girl that is training to be in the Olympics. And I felt like that story was so interesting. There's so much that I learned about the sport that I thought was absolutely fascinating. I knew nothing about it in a technical sense. And obviously this is not like a technical handbook on gymnastics, duh. But I thought that there was so much information in here, but it's like told in a really interesting way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really enjoyed that. You may notice that I said it was a romance, and I have not talked about the romance at all yet. Here's why. So I feel like the romance is fine to begin with. You're like, okay, this is fun. I like this. The guy seems cute and whatever. But I feel like for most of the book, the romance takes a serious backseat. And I was okay with that because, like I said, I was super into the rest of the plot. But then when things start gaining some momentum and they're like getting together, I was like excited. And then of course we have our favorite thing in the world, the third act conflict. And the things that the male main character says really rub me the wrong way. So much so that I was like, screw him. I don't want you to end up with him. I think you would be better off being a strong, independent woman all by yourself, Miss Avery. And I just couldn't sink my teeth into the romance of the rest of the book. It was just really bothering me, and that's why I'm giving it a 4 stars and not a 5, because the rest of the book I really enjoyed. That part was 5 stars. The romance was not, and that's what this is supposed to be. If we're just talking about their relationship and the romance aspect, I would give it maybe like a 3, because at the end he just bothered me so much. Like, the main issue is that she tells him something and he just straight up doesn't believe her. And I know that I might be reading into this, but I feel like it just perpetuates the idea that it's totally okay for men to automatically not believe women because women are liars or dramatic or whatever. And then if they just make like a half-assed apology, the women will just take them back because that's like totally fine. And it's not okay. And it really bothered me, and I didn't feel like there was enough justice to it at the end. So yeah, I didn't love the end of the book, and that really bothered me. But I would say that this is definitely worth reading, and I did enjoy it overall. The third and final book that I ended up finishing this past month was Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. Thank God I have finally finished this book, because if you have watched any of my videos in 2024, you might know that this has been on almost every single monthly TBR. I have been trying to read this book for so long. I believe I got it for Christmas, and it just ended up not working out. And I finally decided to bite the bullet and just read the dang thing. And I'm pretty glad that I did. I think that it's really interesting to read a book whose author is an audiobook narrator, and then the subject of the book is an audiobook narrator. I did listen to the audiobook of it, and it is read by Julia Whalen, and that was super awesome. She is an amazing audiobook narrator. There's so many other books that I've listened to by her, and I really enjoy her work. This book is not autobiographical by any means. It is a romance, but I also feel like it has stronger literary fiction vibes. There's definitely a lot more going on. I ended up giving this book 4 stars because I feel like I just didn't get that 5-star feeling about it, but also it's pretty melancholy in a lot of places. I wouldn't say that there's like an overarching theme of melancholy to the entire book, but there's a lot of themes happening that are just like really sad, and I personally don't super enjoy reading sad fiction. That's just not my vibe. No hate to anybody that really likes that. I know there are a lot of people that really enjoy sad fiction, but for me, I love to read, and I love to read as an escape from real life, and real life can be very sad, as we all know. So I just don't enjoy that, and that kind of brought it down for me, and I'll be honest, it might have taken me a little bit longer to finish it because of that. The main character, Swanee's grandmother, is slowly declining throughout this book. That was not super fun to read about, especially because I've recently had a grandparent pass, so that was like not super fun. And then there's a lot of just like tragic personal backstory that she has. There's family issues, there's a lot going on. There's definitely a lot of fun parts too, but I don't know. I just felt like overall this wasn't really the book for me necessarily. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't like it though. So I would recommend it, but I personally probably wouldn't read it again. But I did think it was interesting, and I did think that it was super well written and obviously well narrated. I know that Julia Whalen has at least one other book called My Oxford Year, and I do really want to read that one eventually because I think that I would enjoy more of her work. So we'll see how I like that one. But then again, like maybe she's just not the author for me. Maybe she just has more melancholy undertones and that's just not my vibe, but we'll see. I'd try her again. So yeah, I'd recommend it, but 4 stars for me, not my absolute favorite. Okay, so now here's everything that I read in October. I ended up finishing 4 books in October. I say finish instead of like read just because there were a couple books this month that I started in a different month that I finished in October, so I just want to be truthful with you guys. The first book that I finished in October was The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I believe I started this book in August. I was reading it for a book club, but then everybody got like stupid busy and we haven't had a book club meeting since our first initial one. And I was just like, whatever, I can't handle this. I need to figure out what happens. So I finished the book and oh my God, this was such a good book. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I feel like I've thought about it a lot since finishing it. And to me, that really says something about how much I enjoyed a book. I always like have initial reactions after I finish a book. I have my immediate opinion, but then I feel like the test of time really shows how you felt about it, because there are some things that I've rated 5 stars in the past, but like since then I've literally never thought about it. So I would maybe go back and be like, I don't really feel like that's a 5-star book, but this book I've thought about so much since finishing. This is the story of June Farrow. All of the women in the Farrow family end up going crazy, kind of. They go mad at some point in their life, and so she basically makes it her mission to be like the last Farrow. She decides that she's not gonna have any kids because she doesn't want this to happen to anyone else. She is raised by her grandmother and ends up watching her grandmother go crazy, and then she starts to feel the effects of it early as well. I feel like it's not fair of me to say much about this book because I feel like the more that you know, the less like shocking it's gonna be. And I feel like because I went into this book basically totally blind, I don't even think I read a synopsis of it. I had just heard people talking about it and I knew it had been one of the Book of the Month Club books. I was just like, yeah, that's probably good. I want to read that. So I did. And I'm so glad. So I also feel like if you want to read this, you should go into it with not that much information. It is a time travel book. It's not a like sci-fi time travel situation. It's a literary fiction book, but it's just so interesting. It's so creative, and it really made me want to read all of the other books that this author has written because I felt like she was a really, really good writer, and I really enjoyed this book so much. I was like honestly surprised by it. I'm honestly kind of sad that I didn't read it sooner because it was so good, and I would definitely not mind owning a physical copy of it because I enjoyed it so much. After that, ladies and gentlemen, I finally finished Empire of Storms. I know. It actually took me literally over a year to finish this book. I looked on Goodreads and it said that I started October 4th of 2023 and I finished it October 10th of 2024. So that's how good it is, guys. It'll take you a whole year to read it. I'm just kidding. It was really good. I can't truthfully give this book a 5-star rating because it took me so long to read it. So I gave it 4 stars. But here's why it took me so long to read it. If you have not been here long, then you wouldn't know that I began the Throne of Glass series in, I believe, April of 2023, and I got stuck on Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn because so many people suggested to read it the tandem read way instead of doing it one after another. And I am here to tell you, do not do that. Do not do that. I mean, please read this series. It's an amazing series. But do not make it a tandem read when you get to the 6th and 7th book because you will hate everything. It will be awful because it feels like you're taking 2 already sizable books and smashing them together into what feels like a never-ending book. It was awful, and I will be completely transparent with you guys. The only reason why I ended up finally pulling through and finishing this book is because I decided to break down and get an Audible subscription, and that was my first free credit, and so I was like, I'm gonna finish Empire of Storms. So that means I'm finishing Tower of Dawn in November, and you bet your butt that I'm probably gonna read Kingdom of Ash in December, because though I will pay for Audible, I will not pay for individual books. So that is my game plan. Anyway, I can't really say much, obviously, about Empire of Storms, seeing as how it is so far into a series. If you don't know anything about the series, Throne of Glass is the story of a young assassin who gets captured, and she ends up at some point having to compete in this tournament. Blah, blah, blah. I really can't say anything else. By the time you get to Empire of Storms, so much has happened. It was an amazing book. There was so much that happened in that book that I was waiting for, and I am excited to finish Tower of Dawn now and then get to the finale in Kingdom of Ash. But yeah, I recommend the book, I recommend the series, but I do not recommend the tandem read. There you go. After that, I read Daydream, which is the 3rd book in the Maple Hill series by Hannah Grace. I believe that I read the first one, Icebreaker, in September or October of last year, and then I read Wildfire, the 2nd one, in January. And so I was very excited to get to this 3rd one. I think it came out in like August or something, so I didn't get to read it right away because I was focusing on other stuff. But I finally got to read it and I loved it so much and I gave it 5 stars. Honestly, I think I've given every book in the series 5 stars, 4 or 5 stars, but I will say this is my favorite out of the 3 of them. I feel like this one had a lot more depth. Not that the other ones don't have any depth, but I just felt like this one really held a lot of weight maybe for me personally, because I saw so much of myself in both of the main characters, it was like actually insane. If you know anything about the Maple Hills series, you know that each book is about a different couple. It's an interconnected standalone series, and all of the guys in each of the couples are on the same hockey team. So this one is about Henry and Hallie, and Hallie is a character that I think is mentioned like once in Wildfire, but you don't know anything about her until you start this book. And I really loved getting to know her. She was so cute and so sweet, and then also you get all of Henry's backstory. You meet him in the first book, he's also in the second book, but then like obviously this is his book, so it's all about him. But yeah, I did see so much of myself in both of these characters. Henry has ADHD and social anxiety, and Hallie is the oldest daughter, and she's very responsible, and she takes on too much, and like all of that, that's me. So I loved this book so much. I felt like it was so sweet and just charming. Also, Hallie is a big reader, a big lover of romance. So if you like romance, if you would want to read this book, then you will probably also really connect with Hallie as a character. So yeah, I highly suggest it. It was really cute, and I give it 5 stars. I just need to own it now. I listened to it on the library app, and I own the first 2 books, but I need a copy of this one now because it was very good. And last but not least, I read A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston in October. This is her newest release. I don't remember when this came out, to be honest, but definitely within the last couple of months. All of Ashley Poston's books that I've read so far, those being The Dead Romantics and then The 7-Year Slip and then this one, have an element of magical realism, which I think is really fun. Like, they're romance books, and it's not like a fantasy book, obviously, but like there's stuff that's just like, that's magic. And that's just really interesting. I feel like that's a nice twist, a nice change of scenery for someone who reads a lot of romance. So in this book, we have our main character, Eileen. She's got a lot going on. She also loves reading romance. And she has this group of friends, and they all go to a cabin every year, and they just like read romance together and hang out, and it's so cute. But this year, unfortunately, everyone has canceled for one reason or another. But she's like kind of down in the dumps, and this is like her lifeline. So she's like, I'm gonna go anyway, and I'm gonna have a great time. And on her way there, she gets really turned around. She is super lost, and she ends up in this little town. Guess what? This little town is actually the town from her favorite romance series. And this is like the series that got her through heartbreak. She's read it over and over again. She's like memorized chunks of it. She knows all the characters. All her friends in their little like book club are also super obsessed with this series. And so she's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? This town like isn't supposed to exist. But she finds herself there, and she meets this dude that is not one of the characters from the series. She doesn't know who he is, and he's the only one that knows that they're both in a town from a book. None of the other characters realize that. They're just like going about their life. They don't know that they're main characters in a book series. Anyway, so that's super interesting. I thought that the plot was super interesting, very creative. However, I did give this 3 stars, and I will say that this is my least favorite of Ashley Poston's books so far because I felt like the pacing was off the whole time, in my opinion. I felt like it was really slow in the beginning, and it was just not getting to the point. Like, it would do that thing where she would be like going about her day, and then she'd be like, that reminds me of when I was heartbroken after my fiance broke up with me. Anyway, and you're just like, okay, what happened? Like, just tell me, just get out of the way. But then you don't find out what happened until like chapters later. So I felt like it was like messing with me, and I didn't appreciate that. It was really slow for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's like kind of insta-lovey at the end, and I really didn't appreciate that. I just felt like the 2 love interests didn't really have chemistry. And as I mentioned before, that is something that really bothers me. So I didn't love that. I didn't really feel a connection to the couple in this book. I didn't really feel a connection to Eileen either. I loved the small town setting. That was very cute. And I loved how important this series is to her. I feel like that's so real. Like, if you're a reader girly, like, everyone's got that book or they've got that series that, like, absolutely changed their life for, like, no reason at all. And you just think about it all the time and you reread it, and that's just your book or your series. And I love that. I feel like the only other book that I've ever read that really talked about like how real that feeling is honestly like The Fault in Our Stars, how there's that book that Hazel just rereads over and over again. But other than that, I feel like nobody really talks about it, and I felt like very seen as a reader because of that. So that was really enjoyable. But yeah, the chemistry and the pacing were not my favorite, and I probably wouldn't read it again, but I would suggest it. I do feel like a lot of people would like it. It just wasn't my cup of tea, and that's why I ended up giving it 3 stars. Okay, so that is everything that I read in September and October. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below what is your most favorite recent read. I would love to know. Maybe I will have to read that soon. All of my social media links are in the description below. You can go follow me on any of those if you would like to. And I will see you next time. Bye!